Did everybody come up with an example from outside of the reading of an example of a bias? I know I came up with one. Go ahead.
Oh, there's Holly.
Oh, she's sending one because I sent that email. And so I guess now, well, should I just write her and say, just come on over and join us?
Just come join us.
Yeah. Well, she said she didn't know how to record it. I guess she figured it out. What was your guys' example?
So for me, there was two of them that I was thinking about, and one of the two that I was thinking about was approval and familiarity. And in those ones right there, the approval was kind of interesting because I witnessed not too long ago in the company I work for. We had an opportunity. There were some individuals that were up for manager position to move forward within the company. And in this one, from the reading when I got from it said in one series of studies, researchers found that people were more willing to endorse an overly generous outcome that favored them in particular than they were to make that judgment personally on themselves. And it was interesting seeing this example in my life and watching some of these other individuals because they were told, you deserve a higher position in the company and all this stuff, even though the facts might not suggest that you should likely receive that or that you agree with that point of view. And I listened to some of those people. They're like, "Oh, I've made some mistakes in the past. I don't know if I'm qualified to do that, but hey, they think I am, so I'm gonna go ahead and move forward with it." And it was it was interesting to see that. And I was trying to make those correlations because then they began to feel more confident and agree with that personally. And even if, like I said, they didn't really feel like they lived up to it and those expectations in the past. And then the next scenario that I came up with was the familiarity. And that when it says people are more willing to harm strangers than individuals they know, especially when those individuals are paying clients and all that, when I guess with the accounting. And in looking at that too, one of the scenarios I saw is, again, working in the jewelry business and seeing how those kind of aspects work out. It's kind of sad to see some individuals, they might not, when they know somebody, they're more willing, I guess, to bend backwards and do stuff. And I know that sounds harsh, even though some people might not want to admit it, it happens sometimes. And that's one of the biases, I think, kind of in any type of retail or sales, you kind of notice that, like, if they know you, they're more willing to maybe even discount more or willing to help out more rather than if it's a stranger. And the stranger, they're like, "Oh, yeah, you can just pay the regular retail price," or whatever that is. So that's kind of something that kind of stuck out to me and looking at both of those scenarios and being biased. And it helped me kind of sit back and like, okay, it's hard to practically eliminate all bias, and that's what it said in the reading too. But it helps you just kind of pick those things out and to try to eliminate those little things in your life. So anyway, Those are my examples I came up with.
Yeah, I know that I have bias, and I would never try to deny it because it's like it's obvious. I admit that I'm biased in a lot of things, and everybody is. It's just kind of part of being human. Kind of part of the familiarity. I just kind of thought when the other month I took my car to the mechanic and they had it checked out. They didn't do anything to it, but just the checking it out, they charged me $45. But my dad goes there often, so they know my dad, and he's like, since you're Richard's kid, I'm gonna let it pass. I'm not gonna charge you anything. And so I was glad that my dad's in their good graces, that they like him because he had been going there for many years and stuff. So that's since they know familiar with him, and then they just kind of gave me the benefit too of not having to pay. My example I put down for the quiz was one of my coworkers. Really, really cool guy. Everybody really likes him. Really funny. You know, good personality and stuff. He kind of has a tendency to be lazy at times, and I don't think anybody nor himself would deny that. And so our business culture is pretty laid back. I work for a small business, and it's a small event production company. So it's not nearly as strict as like some larger corporations. You know, even the start time, a lot of people sometimes are like 10, 15 minutes late. They don't really, you know, get anything for it. But this one coworker often is more like a half hour late, like every day, or sometimes even more. And the other week, and I mean, if there's not a whole lot going on that day, it's not really a big deal. But when there's a show going on, a show meaning an event that we're producing, we need to get theirs and set up because we have a tight deadline, and we're working with the client. So obviously, we want to make a good impression. The other week, he was actually really late for that and wasn't able to help set up very much. And so one of the guys in the office was pretty upset with, actually, you know, a couple of guys, our general manager was pretty upset. And then I just kind of overheard somebody saying in the office that, you know, if this was somebody else, then they probably could be fired for it, because that's a pretty big deal. But, you know, this guy's been in the company for years. Everybody really likes him. The general manager loves him. They're good friends. And it's like, I think everybody knew that it's a problem. And whether or not he's going to get better at that, I don't know. But I don't think he's going to get fired. And actually, he even admitted one time that if he was working for another company, he probably would have been fired a long time ago. But, you know, so anyways, that was my example of attachment and familiarity.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good one. I have a similar situation in my current office right now as well. The branch manager, when I first got here to Atlanta, he was always like, maybe like once or twice a week he'd be coming into work. And so we were all like, okay, that's not right. And then we had a employee complained at corporate about it, and then they came, you know, checking up on everything. And you know, the owner of the company's brother like was calling us all up and like asking us to give statements and stuff like that. And then this particular manager, he's really good friends with the COO, and he called me. The COO called me, and he's like, hey, if you had an issue, why didn't you come to me instead? And all this stuff like that. And he kind of jumped in and started calling everybody that, you know, the other people at corporate had already talked to, and kind of just like making sure he did damage control, kind of sweeping things under the rug to kind of make sure that this particular guy didn't get in trouble. And same thing, at the end of the day, he kind of got off scot-free. They're like, oh, we're going to put him on probation and stuff like that, but nothing really ever came of it. So had it been anyone else, in fact, there was a couple other managers just last year that got fired for the same thing, but this particular one didn't, because just good friends with someone upstairs. So
His connections, right?
yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Holly, do you got any situations or examples of bias?
Yeah, so I actually am in accounting, and I'm the job costing manager at the corporation that we're at, or that I'm at. And so we deal with auditors all the time. So a lot of the stuff I read is exactly what we do, you know, every day. And my example is with our particular company, we have a lot of federal contracts, and our because we have federal contracts, we can't have the same auditors all of the time because of the familiarity and all of that and ambiguity. So every 5 years, we have to bid out all of our audits so that we get new auditors in there all the time so that they don't get really comfortable with us and us with them so that they don't let things slide. Anyway, so that's the example that I have, is just that we're forced to do that, but I can see why, because, you know, once you start getting to know the auditors really well, and you can just say, oh, well, you know, we coded something this way because of whatever, and, you know, they kind of let it go because they're used to, you know, what we do. Anyway, so having to have the 5-year turnaround on auditors really cuts back on that, you know, letting things go. So we're really, really careful on everything we code. We do a lot of project coding, and you know, we have to account for everything. We have federal auditors as well. So anyway.
Wow. Well, that's good. I like that exactly with the article that we read.
It was almost like reading what I do at work every day. So
yeah. Wow. That's super nice. Well, I like that example then.
Yeah.
Right with the reading.
Well, I know it's real, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it looks like, so after we kind of discussed those different types of bias that we encountered, there were some general discussion topics that we were supposed to go over. So we were just supposed to choose some of them as a following guide. So let's see what some of them here. Let me just pull that up.
I have it here.
Okay.
It says have a more general discussion about the article we read. So one discussion we can have is, the title of this unit is ethics, but according to the article you just read, at least in the case of auditors, teaching auditors about ethics will not have an impact on bias. The authors suggest education that helps auditors understand the unconscious errors they make and the reasons they make them. For business students and others who will not be auditors, what kind of education, if any, would help future business professionals avoid bias, and is it pointless?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we need to know, essentially, that can help us avoid bias, or is it pointless altogether? My opinion.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my opinion is I think that you can reduce bias, but you definitely can't eliminate it, because that's like, I feel like bias, it really just, it depends on the person, their point of view, and you can't just eliminate and have just one universal point of view. I mean, everybody has a different opinion, and those opinions can be based on bias. Even facts, like look at like politics, you have the same facts, two totally different ways of spinning it or more, and it's like you can have the same facts and have totally different outcomes. So, but yeah, I think you can reduce it, but I don't think you can eliminate it.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, go ahead, Holly, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think you can eliminate it either. It's human nature.
Yeah.
You know, so I think you can use integrity and ethics and all of that, but you will always have some kind of biases. You know, we all do. So we all see it every day.
Yep. And that's kind of the thing. That's, you know, the conclusion of this article and everything when I came down. I mean, they had lots of evidence supporting, like even psychologist research showing that the desires that we have will in turn powerfully influence the way that we interpret information. And even if we're trying, I thought it was interesting that they said this in the reading. They said that they proved that even if we're trying to be open-minded and to be impartial to certain topics, it's inevitable that those types of desires that we personally have from our characters, from our past experiences, are ultimately going to determine our outcome of what we believe. What they say is we unequivocally embrace the evidence that will support our position even if we are unaware of that process or what's going on. And I kind of was sitting there thinking about that, and I going over just reviewing my personal, my personal, like I'm the general manager of a jewelry business right now, and going over the stuff, I realized that I'm like, there's areas that I need to improve on in certain things that I could potentially, with the biasm and all that stuff. But it's hard. I agree with both you guys, Kyle and Holly and Michael, that we can't eliminate it. It's pretty much, it's a practical part of our system and our society that like what you guys said, everyday life. So I don't know. That's kind of some things that were sticking out to me from in that regards as well. So,
one thing I thought was interesting is all of their experiments had to do with money. And I think money really creates a lot of bias. Everybody wants whatever's going to benefit them the most. And I thought in their experiments in the article that we read, I just found it interesting that every one of them, their bias was towards whatever they thought would make them come out better.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Even as members of the church, we have biases. We typically are going to, we're probably going to favor, I think it's, members of the church often will favor, or even like in the workplace, they would probably more likely favor somebody else that they know is a member of the church. And I think that applies to like any kind of club or any kind of fraternity or whatever, that people, if they're part of some organization together, they're likely going to have a bias and favor that person.
Yep.
All sorts of other biases we have in the church too, or like there's just a ton. Like I remember hearing this past Sunday that Gordon B. Hinckley was very optimistic about the future, and when he was on 60 Minutes, he was just saying how he thinks the future looks bright and he doesn't have like this doom mentality. And when Larry Keene asked Elder Faust why Gordon B. Hinckley was so optimistic, he said it was because Gordon B. Hinckley already knew how everything was going to end. He knew that things are going to turn out all right. And so I guess you kind of see that as like a type of like bias, that he's kind of biased towards, seeing the future in a positive light. I don't know if that's the right word to describe it or not, but I would kind of say that's a type of bias. So I guess in that sense, not all biases are even bad,
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why do you guys think it's so difficult then to overcome biasm then, even when we know about it? Because like in us talking about it, stuff like we're all aware of it and we understand it. So why do you think it's so difficult for us to overcome it?
I think it's like it's said in the article too. It kind of can spring from desires, and as long as we have desires, then we'll have biases. And until the day we become some sort of cyborg or robot and we have no more like emotion and desire, or if you're like Buddha, who like eliminates all desire, we're always going to have desires and we're always going to have biases. So
yeah. That's interesting too, because I was just kind of thinking about that too. That was one of the questions that they asked us on this, is why we think it's so difficult to overcome. And I was sitting there thinking about, and kind of going back to what you just said, Kyle, and it's in a sense what makes us human. We all make mistakes. We all have those trials and errors, but we learn from those and we try to become better. And so thinking of these bias and knowing that, they are difficult to overcome because it's what makes us human. And as Holly said, a lot of these ones that we saw in the reading and from this article had to deal with money situations. A lot of the scenarios that they showed us or we read had to deal with those money, I guess, issues. And so thinking back on it, I guess that also plays a role into that. Can cloud your judgment, that can cloud kind of what you're going forward with. Because we all need to make a living and we all need to do, I guess, move forward with that. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting kind of thought-provoking question as well. even if we know about it, how do we overcome it? And I guess going back and looking into it also like from an LDS perspective, and since we all are members of the church, all the time in the church, we try to always talk about, look at the bigger picture and try to focus on the end goal. But sometimes people just get tangled up with their day-to-day lives, and sometimes don't even look to thank our Heavenly Father in prayer, or they miss their scripture studies, and they don't do those little things that have, I guess, a greater impact for the future. And then we have to sit there and, okay, this thing's important, so we need to try to work harder and move forward. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to tie it down into, is this all comes together pretty much in a spiritual aspect of like the plan of salvation, that we're all trying to become better and overcome those weaknesses and those trials and those errors that make us human. And we're trying to become more like our Heavenly Father. And so I was kind of just thinking more, sorry for turning it into more of like a spiritual aspect, but just thinking about that as well. Is this, even when we know about it, we make mistakes, and we just got to try to do better tomorrow. So.
Is there anything else we want to discuss here? There's some other questions.
I thought it was interesting, the question about, do you think the bias that was discovered for plaintiffs and defendants lead to a flawed legal system? I thought it was really interesting because those experiments that they did makes it seem like it probably is a little bit flawed, only because of the biases. Everybody's out for whichever side they're on, but that's what they're supposed to do too. So, that's kind of a hard question. If you're the plaintiff, you want to win. If you're the defendant, you want to win.
But yeah, both sides are definitely biased. I think the key is trying to find an unbiased jury, and that's why I think they go through kind of a process to weed out anybody that might have any bias or might have any pre-conditioned opinion about the case. They'll try to weed out those people.
True.
But yeah, like if they're considering somebody for murder or some other crime, and they have a history of criminal activity, and then if you have some other suspect that doesn't have any history, it's like, I think the bias is going to be towards the person that has a history.
True.
But that makes sense, because it's like I would have that bias too. It's like, yeah, this person has a history, but it's in the legal system, you got to try your best to not have biases and treat people as innocent until proven guilty.
So what should we write our paragraph on?
Oh, there is. I didn't think there was anything we actually had to turn in when your group is finished.
We have to write a paragraph telling what was the most important or interesting insight that we gained from the discussion.
Anything that stuck out to you guys?
I think pretty much just that bias is human nature. I think you can do the best you can, but I was saying, I don't think you can ever totally eliminate it. I think you can just do the best you can.
Yeah, just it's that human nature, and you stay and get better. Let me go. Did everybody have that Google Docs pulled up?
Mm-mm.
Let's just find it again. Oh, there.
Are we going to write the paragraph here? We want to start at the bottom of wrong answer number 3, and whoever submits it can just copy and paste it. That way we don't mess with the template.
Yeah,
that sounds.
You want me to start it? Or does somebody
Yeah.
else want to?
That'd be great, Ollie. If you want to start that, I think we're all in here now. So
Okay. I'm gonna grab the instructions and just put it there. Let's see. Most important. So would you say most important or most interesting?
I thought it was kind of the most interesting thing insight that we pretty much got was that biasm it's human nature. It's what makes us who we are, and that's a fact of the matter. That's why we can't eliminate it from our society, because it's what makes us who we are. I mean, we can always try to do better and improve, but
So what were you just saying, Ben? Say that again.
So I was just saying that I do believe it is the most interesting insight. Let's see what we have. The most interesting insight our group gained from this discussion is that bias is part of our human nature. From what we noticed in the reading, psychologists have proven that. Let me actually get my notes that I have for it. So psychologists have done research and interpreted the information. Well, have shown that the influence that we gain from that we have from our personal lives, even though we try so hard to interpret the information objectively or impartially, no matter what, there's gonna be some type of biasm that's gonna come into our decision making or our position or standpoints. It's always gonna be there, and that's just because we're human. And it's what the reader says, imagine any practical system that could eliminate all biasm. So bias. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let's write some of that.
Shouldn't this be not be objective or impartial?
Yes. Let's see.
I'm gonna go ahead and start typing stuff too. hope it should flow okay, and we'll edit it at the end anyway. So. Yeah, I'm just gonna type down here.
Tendency to not be okay. I don't like that. Let's see.
Who wants to turn this assignment in this week?
What's that?
Who wants to turn this in this week?
I could go ahead and do it this week.
Okay. And I need to take off here. Do we feel pretty good about this? I mean, it looks like we have
I
a
think
good
so.
amount of. And I mean, obviously, we can all stay on here and keep typing. I just have something else I have to do before I go to bed. So we just won't be able to hear each other.
Okay. Well, when would you guys like me to post this? Because I'm reading this, and I mean, let's see what we have right here.
It's due tomorrow evening, so I mean, just any time before it's due.
Yeah.
So if you want me to, I mean, we just need to pretty much come up with a conclusion, then I can go ahead and submit it, because it's basically just a summary of what we talked about and kind of some of those things that we picked out. So if you guys want, I can just go ahead and do that. Or I mean, what do you guys think of this that we have so far? Let's see what we have right here. That's what we can do. Make this a raster, making marking for us. That gives me raster.
I think it just needs just a little tiny bit of cleanup, and it's good.
Okay. Well, if you guys want, I can go ahead and tie these together with a conclusion and read through it a few times, and then I can go ahead and submit that this evening. So
Sounds good.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks you guys for meeting tonight, and good luck, Kyle, with the other things you got to get done.
Yeah, it's actually a quick screencast I have to make for another class. I want to do it before I go to bed.
Oh,
Yeah.
Awesome. Good luck with that, you guys, and we'll see you next week, same time.
Okay.
All right.
sounds
See you
good.
guys. Have a good week.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.